I was only 7, but I learned very quickly that love can disappear without warning. One day, I was their daughter, and the next, I was something they barely wanted to look at. I remember the way the house changed first. The silence, the sharp voices, the chores that piled higher than my small hands could handle. The fear of making the tiniest mistake, because I knew what came after. I was a child, but I felt like a shadow in my own home. Meals taken away, words thrown at me like stones, and nights where I cried so quietly even the walls couldn't hear. I kept telling myself, maybe tomorrow will be different, maybe tomorrow they'll see me. But tomorrow never changed. And every day, I felt myself slipping into a life no child should ever have to survive. My name is Lisa, and this is the story of how I survived a childhood that tried to kill my spirit, a home that tried to break my soul, and a marriage that tried to bury me alive. This is the story of how I went from being an unwanted child to a forgotten daughter, to a trapped wife, to something I never imagined I could become. This is the story of how God took every broken piece of my shattered life and rebuilt it into something more beautiful than I ever could have dreamed. If you stay with me until the end, you will understand why I believe in miracles. You will understand why I never stopped praying even when it felt like heaven had gone deaf. You will understand why I stand before you today not as a victim, but as a survivor, not as someone who was destroyed, but as someone who was transformed. But first, let me take you back to the beginning. Let me take you back to when I was just a little girl with tangled hair and torn clothes, sitting on the cold floor of an orphanage, wondering why nobody wanted me. I do not remember my biological parents. I do not have a single memory of a mother holding me close or a father lifting me into the air with laughter. My earliest memories are of the orphanage, of shared beds with strangers, of caregivers who were too tired and too overwhelmed to give any of us the love we desperately needed. I remember lying awake at night, listening to other children cry themselves to sleep, wondering what was wrong with me, wondering why I was there, wondering if anyone would ever come for me. Some children got adopted quickly. I watched them leave with their new families, their faces bright with hope, their small hands clutching the hands of strangers who promised them a better life. I would press my face against the window and watch them drive away, and I would whisper prayers into the glass. Please, God, please let someone choose me. Please let someone want me. Please give me a family. I prayed that prayer every single day for years. Every time a couple came to the orphanage looking for a child to adopt, my heart would race. I would sit up straight. I would try to smile my brightest smile. I would hope with everything in me that they would look at me and see something worth loving. But they never did. Couple after couple passed me by. They would look at younger children, cuter children, children with lighter skin or bigger eyes or sweeter dispositions. They would sign papers and take those children home, and I would be left behind, still sitting on that cold floor, still wondering what was wrong with me. By the time I was 6, I had stopped hoping. I had stopped believing that anyone would ever want me. I had accepted that I would grow up in that orphanage, that I would age out of the system, that I would spend my entire life unwanted and unloved. And then, one ordinary afternoon, everything changed. A woman walked into the orphanage. She was dressed in clean clothes, nice clothes, the kind of clothes I had only seen in pictures. Her hair was neatly styled, and she wore earrings that caught the light when she moved. She looked kind. She looked gentle. She looked like the kind of mother I had always dreamed about. She walked through the room slowly, looking at all of us, and when her eyes met mine, something happened. She stopped. She stared at me for a long moment, and then she smiled. She smiled at me. My heart nearly stopped beating. She walked over to where I was sitting, and she knelt down so that we were eye to eye. She reached out and touched my cheek gently, and she said words I will never forget. "Hello, little one. Would you like to come home with me?" I could not speak. I could not breathe. I could only nod, tears streaming down my face, my entire body trembling with a hope so powerful it felt like it might tear me apart. She took my hand in hers, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt what it was like to be chosen. The adoption process took several months, But those months were filled with visits and promises and dreams of a future I had never dared to imagine. The woman's name was Mrs. Chen, and she had a husband named Mr. Chen, and they had a nice house in a nice neighborhood with a bedroom already prepared for me. A bedroom with a real bed and clean sheets and curtains on the window, and a small desk where I could do homework. Homework, because they promised I would go to school. School. I had never been to school before. The orphanage had basic education programs, but they were inconsistent and underfunded. The thought of going to a real school, sitting in a real classroom, learning from real teachers, made me dizzy with excitement. On the day the adoption was finalized, I packed my few belongings into a small bag and walked out of that orphanage holding Mrs. Chen's hand. I turned around once to look at the building that had been my home for as long as I could remember, and I whispered a final prayer. Thank you, God. Thank you for answering my prayers. Thank you for giving me a family. I believed those words with every fiber of my being. I believed that my suffering was over. I believed that my new life was beginning. And for 2 beautiful, perfect, miraculous years, I was right. Those first 2 years with the Chen family were everything I had ever dreamed of. They enrolled me in school almost immediately, and I discovered that I loved learning. I loved reading books and solving math problems and listening to my teachers explain how the world worked. I was behind the other students my age because of my years in the orphanage, but I worked harder than anyone else in my class to catch up. My teachers noticed my dedication. They praised me. They told Mrs. Chen that I was a bright student with enormous potential. Mrs. Chen would smile when she heard these things, and she would pat my head and tell me she was proud of me. Those words meant everything to me. She was proud of me. Someone was finally proud of me. I had birthday parties for the first time in my life. Mrs. Chen would bake a cake and put candles on it and sing the birthday song while Mr. Chen clapped along. I would close my eyes and make a wish and blow out the candles, and every single time I wished for the same thing. Please let this last forever. Please let me stay in this family forever. Please do not let them send me back. I was terrified of being sent back to the orphanage. That fear never left me, no matter how kind the Chens seemed. I had seen it happen to other children. I had heard stories of adoptions that failed, of children who were returned like damaged goods. I was determined to be the perfect daughter so that they would never have a reason to give me up. I helped with chores without being asked. I kept my room spotlessly clean. I studied hard and brought home good grades. I was polite and quiet and obedient. I did everything I could think of to make them love me. And for 2 years, it seemed to work. For 2 years, I was Lisa Chen, beloved daughter, good student, happy child. For 2 years, I finally knew what it felt like to belong somewhere. But slowly, so slowly that I almost did not notice at first, everything began to change. It started with small things. Mrs. Chen began sighing heavily whenever she looked at me. She stopped smiling when I came into the room. She stopped asking about my day at school. She stopped praising my grades. At first, I thought I had done something wrong. I tried harder. I studied longer. I cleaned more thoroughly. I made myself smaller and quieter, trying desperately to figure out what I had done to displease her so that I could fix it. But nothing I did seemed to help. The warmth that had once filled our home began to drain away, replaced by something cold and distant. Mr. Chen stopped paying attention to me entirely. He would look through me as if I were not even there, as if I were invisible, as if I were a piece of furniture that had always been in the corner of the room. And then the criticism started. Why did you fold the towels like that? Do it again. You call this clean. A pig could do better. Why are you so slow? What is wrong with you? Stop eating so much. Food costs money, you know. Every word was like a knife in my heart. I had worked so hard to be perfect, and suddenly nothing I did was good enough. I could clean the entire house from top to bottom, and Mrs. Chen would find one speck of dust and berate me for hours. I could cook dinner exactly the way she taught me, and she would push the plate away and tell me it was inedible. I stopped being their daughter. I became their servant. The chores that I had once done voluntarily became mandatory. I was expected to wake up before dawn to prepare breakfast. I was expected to clean every room in the house before I left for school. I was expected to come home immediately after classes ended and spend the rest of the day cooking, cleaning, washing, scrubbing, organizing. I was 9 years old. 9 years old, and working harder than most adults. My hands became rough and calloused. My back ached constantly from bending over sinks and mops and piles of laundry. My knees bruised from kneeling on hard floors to scrub away stains that would never fully disappear. But the physical exhaustion was nothing compared to the emotional devastation. Mrs. Chen stopped calling me by my name. She started calling me girl, or you, or sometimes nothing at all. She would snap her fingers at me like I was a dog and point at whatever task she wanted me to complete. She would roll her eyes when I spoke and tell me to stop wasting her time with my foolish words. When I made mistakes, the punishments were swift and cruel. She never hit me. She never left bruises on my skin that the world could see. Her abuse was far more insidious, far more damaging, far more impossible to prove. If I spilled water while mopping, I was denied dinner. If I broke a dish while washing, I was locked in my room for an entire day. If I talked back or tried to defend myself, she would ignore me completely for weeks. She would not speak to me, not acknowledge my existence, not even look in my direction. She would act as if I had ceased to exist, as if I were a ghost haunting her home. Those silent punishments were the worst. I would rather have been beaten. At least a beating ends. At least the pain fades. But the silence went on and on and on, making me feel more alone and worthless with each passing day. I started believing the things she said about me. I started believing I was stupid, useless, a burden, a waste of space. I started believing that no one could ever love me. I started believing that I deserved to be treated this way. That was the cruelest thing of all. That was the deepest wound. Not the work, not the hunger, not the silence, but the way she made me hate myself. The way she convinced me that I was fundamentally broken, fundamentally unlovable, fundamentally worthless. I would lie awake at night in my small bed, the same bed that had once felt like a miracle, and I would cry silent tears into my pillow. God, what did I do wrong? God, why do they hate me now? God, please help me understand. But no answer came. Only silence. Only darkness. Only the sound of my own quiet sobbing. By the time I was 10 years old, they decided that even school was too good for me. Mrs. Chen pulled me aside one morning and told me, in a matter-of-fact voice devoid of emotion, that I would no longer be attending classes. I felt the blood drain from my face. But I love school, I whispered. I am doing well. My teachers say I have potential. She laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound that I had never heard before. Potential? You? Do not be ridiculous. You are barely smart enough to scrub floors. School is a waste of time and money for a girl like you. Please, I begged. Tears were streaming down my face now, and I did not care. Please let me stay in school. I will work harder at home. I will do everything you ask. Please do not take school away from me. She grabbed my arm hard enough to leave fingerprints on my skin. The decision is made. You are finished with school. Now stop crying and get to work. There is laundry to be done. She released me and walked away, leaving me standing there with my dreams crumbling around my feet. School was the only thing I had left. School was my escape, my sanctuary, my hope for a different future. I had dreamed of becoming a teacher someday, of standing at the front of a classroom and helping children learn the way my teachers had helped me. That dream was my light in the darkness, the tiny flame that kept me going through the endless days of work and criticism and emotional abuse. And now that dream was gone. When the neighbors asked why I was no longer in school, I heard Mrs. Chen lie with a straight face and a sympathetic tone. She is not smart enough. The teachers said she cannot keep up. School is a waste on her. We are doing her a kindness by letting her focus on household skills instead. The neighbors nodded and clucked their tongues and looked at me with pity in their eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them the truth. I wanted to beg them to help me. But I could not. I had learned by then that speaking up only made things worse. I had learned that the world did not want to hear the truth, that people preferred comfortable lies to uncomfortable realities. I had learned that I was alone, truly and completely alone, and no one was coming to save me. So I stayed silent. I always stayed silent. Years passed. Endless, brutal, soul-crushing years. I grew from a child into a teenager, and then from a teenager into something barely recognizable as human. I was thin from never having enough to eat. My hands were permanently scarred from harsh cleaning chemicals and scalding water. My posture was hunched from years of submissive body language, from making myself as small and invisible as possible to avoid Mrs. Chen's wrath. But the worst damage was on the inside. My spirit was broken. My hope was dead. My dreams had withered into nothing. I moved through each day like a machine, completing task after task without thought or feeling. Wake up, cook, clean, wash, scrub, cook again, clean again, collapse into bed, wake up, repeat. There was no joy, there was no rest, there was no love. There was only survival. And every night, despite everything, despite the silence from heaven, despite the feeling that God had abandoned me, I still prayed. I would kneel beside my bed in the darkness, fold my hands together, and whisper the same words I had whispered since I was a little girl in the orphanage. God, please do not forget me. God, please do not let my story end like this. God, please send someone to help me. Those prayers kept me alive. Those prayers kept me sane. Those prayers kept a tiny, flickering spark of hope burning in the deepest part of my soul, even when everything around me was darkness. I told myself that God was working on something. I told myself that this suffering had to mean something. I told myself that one day, somehow, things would get better. I had no idea how wrong I would be before I was finally right. When I turned 18, I thought things might change. I thought maybe, finally, I would have some control over my own life. I thought maybe I could leave, find a job, start over somewhere new. I was so naive. I was so foolish. I was so unprepared for what was coming. Mrs. Chen called me into the living room one evening with a strange look on her face. It was almost excited, almost gleeful, in a way that made my stomach tighten with fear. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. I sat, my hands folded in my lap, my eyes fixed on the floor. "I have wonderful news," she said, and the word wonderful sounded like poison dripping from her tongue. "You are going to be married." The world stopped spinning. "Married," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, to a man named Wei. He is 30 years old, established, ready to start a family. He has agreed to take you as his wife." But I do not know him. I have never met him, I do not." "You do not need to know him," she interrupted sharply. "He has agreed to marry you. Do you understand what a gift that is? A girl like you, with no education, no skills, no family, and he is willing to take you into his home. You should be grateful." "Please," I begged, tears springing to my eyes. "Please do not make me do this. Please let me stay here. I will work harder. I will do anything you ask, please." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "The decision is made. The wedding is in 2 weeks. You will marry Wei, and you will leave this house, and you will be his problem now." She walked out of the room without another word, leaving me shattered on that chair, my entire world collapsing around me for the second time in my life. I did not want to get married. I did not want to belong to a stranger. I had never even dreamed of romance or love or wedding dresses because I knew those things were not for girls like me. But I had hoped, foolishly, desperately hoped, that I would at least have some choice in my own future. But I had no choice. I had never had any choice. I was property, passed from one owner to another, my wishes and dreams and fears completely irrelevant. The wedding was small and joyless. I wore a borrowed dress that did not fit properly. There were no flowers, no music, no celebration. Just a ceremony and some papers, and then I was loaded into Wei's car like baggage and driven to my new prison. I remember staring out the window during that drive, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood disappear behind me, replaced by unfamiliar roads leading to an unfamiliar destination. I remember wondering if this was really my life, if this nightmare was really happening, if there was any way to wake up and find myself somewhere else, someone else, anyone else. But there was no waking up. There was only Wei. And Wei was a monster. I learned this very quickly. He was an alcoholic. He drank every single day, starting in the afternoon and continuing until he passed out late at night. When he was sober, he was cold and distant, ignoring me completely, treating me like I did not exist. When he was drunk, he was terrifying. He would shout at me for hours about nothing and everything. He would scream that I was useless, that I was ugly, that he regretted ever agreeing to marry me. He would throw things across the room, plates and glasses and bottles, and I would cower in the corner, covering my head with my arms, praying that nothing would hit me. He manipulated me constantly. He would be cruel one day and kind the next, keeping me constantly off balance, never knowing what version of him I would encounter when he walked through the door. He would apologize for his behavior and promise to change, and I would believe him because I was desperate to believe that things could get better. And then he would drink again, and the cycle would repeat. He hit me. The first time it happened, I was so shocked that I could not even react. He had been shouting about something. I do not even remember what, and suddenly his fist connected with my face, and I was on the ground, blood pouring from my split lip, stars exploding behind my eyes. I lay there on the cold floor, unable to move, unable to think, unable to understand what had just happened. He stood over me, swaying slightly, his eyes unfocused from the alcohol. "Clean up this mess," he slurred, gesturing vaguely at the blood on the floor. "And stop crying, you are pathetic." He staggered to the bedroom and passed out on the bed, leaving me lying in my own blood, more alone than I had ever been in my entire life. That was not the last time he hit me. It became a regular occurrence. Whenever he was angry, whenever he was frustrated, whenever life did not go the way he wanted, he would take it out on me. I learned to read his moods, to predict when a storm was coming, to make myself as invisible as possible to avoid his rage. But I could not avoid it completely. No one can avoid a monster who shares their home. I stopped looking in mirrors because I could not stand to see the bruises on my face. I stopped leaving the apartment because I was ashamed of what the neighbors might think. I stopped eating because the stress had destroyed my appetite entirely. I was dying. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, piece by piece, day by day, I was dying. My body was failing from malnutrition and exhaustion. My mind was crumbling under the weight of constant fear and trauma. My spirit, that tiny spark that had survived the orphanage and the Chens and all those years of suffering, was finally flickering out. I had survived so much. I had endured so much. But I did not know if I could survive this. I did not know if I even wanted to. One night, after Wei had gone through one of his worst episodes, I found myself lying on the kitchen floor in the darkness, curled into a ball, sobbing so hard that I could barely breathe. He had screamed at me for hours. He had thrown every dish in the cabinet. He had hit me twice, once in the stomach and once across the face. He had told me that I was worthless, that I deserved everything that was happening to me, that no one would ever love me, that I should just die. And lying there on that cold floor, surrounded by broken glass and shattered dreams, I almost believed him. I almost gave up. I almost let the darkness win. But instead, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I prayed. Through my sobs, through my pain, through my despair, I forced out the words that I had been speaking my entire life. "God, please, please do not let my story end like this. Please, I am begging you, I cannot do this anymore. I am not strong enough. Please send someone to help me. Please show me that you have not forgotten me. Please, please." I do not know how long I lay there crying and praying. I do not know when I finally fell asleep. I only know that when I woke up the next morning, sore and exhausted and hopeless, I had no idea that everything was about to change. Wei had gone out the night before, after he was finished with me. He had stumbled out of the apartment to find more alcohol, leaving me bleeding on the floor. That morning, I heard shouting outside. I dragged myself to the window and looked down at the street below, and what I saw made my heart stop. Wei was lying on the ground outside our building. There were people gathered around him. Someone was calling for help. I watched in numb disbelief as neighbors rushed to assist him. Apparently, he had passed out drunk on the street during the night and had been lying there for hours. Someone had finally noticed him that morning and was trying to determine if he was still alive. I should have felt something, fear, perhaps, or concern or relief. But I felt nothing. I was empty. I was hollow. I was beyond feeling. But then something happened that I will never forget as long as I live. One of the neighbors, a woman I had never spoken to before, looked up at the window where I was standing. Our eyes met. And in that single moment, she saw everything. She saw the bruises on my face that I had stopped bothering to hide. She saw the fear in my eyes that I could no longer conceal. She saw the broken, desperate, dying girl standing at that window, and for the first time in years, someone actually saw me. She said something to the person next to her, and then she pulled out her phone and made a call. I stepped away from the window, my heart pounding, my mind racing. What was she doing? Who was she calling? What was going to happen? Part of me wanted to hide. Part of me wanted to run. Part of me was terrified of what might come next. But another part of me, a small but growing part, felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Hope. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it slowly, carefully, ready to slam it shut and run if I needed to. But standing on the other side was not Wei. It was a woman in a police uniform. She was young, maybe in her early 30s, with a calm face and kind eyes. She looked at me without judgment, without pity, with nothing but gentle concern. "Hello," she said softly. "My name is Officer May. May I come in and talk with you for a few minutes?" I hesitated. Every instinct I had developed over years of abuse screamed at me to refuse, to protect myself, to trust no one. But there was something in her voice, something in her eyes, that made me step aside and let her enter. She walked into the apartment slowly, taking in the broken dishes still scattered on the floor, the holes punched in the walls, the general chaos that I had stopped noticing long ago because it was simply my normal. Then she turned to me and gestured toward the couch. "Would you like to sit down?" I sat because I did not know what else to do. She sat across from me, her hands folded in her lap, her posture open and non-threatening. "A neighbor called about your husband," she said gently. "He collapsed outside last night. He is being taken to the hospital to be checked out." I nodded but said nothing. "But she also called about you," Officer May continued. "She said she saw you at the window and she was worried. She said you looked like someone who needed help." Tears welled up in my eyes unbidden. "Can you tell me about those bruises on your face?" she asked, her voice never losing its gentle tone. I opened my mouth to lie. I opened my mouth to say I fell, or I walked into a door, or whatever excuse Wei had trained me to give. But the words would not come. Instead, something broke inside me. All the pain, all the fear, all the silence, all the years of suffering that I had never been able to share with anyone, came pouring out of me in a flood of tears and broken words. I told her everything. I told her about the orphanage and the adoption and the Chens. I told her about the years of emotional abuse, the endless work, the denial of food and education. I told her about the forced marriage, about Wei, about the drinking and the shouting and the violence. I told her about the night before, about lying on the floor in my own blood, about praying to a God I was no longer sure was listening. I told her things I had never told anyone, things I had barely admitted to myself. And she listened. She did not interrupt. She did not judge. She did not tell me what I should have done differently or how I should have protected myself. She just listened. When I finally ran out of words, when I was empty and exhausted and trembling, she reached out and took my hands in hers. Lisa, she said, using my name, treating me like a person, treating me like I mattered. You are incredibly brave. Do you know that? To survive what you have survived, to endure what you have endured, that takes a strength that most people cannot even imagine. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. I am not brave, I whispered. I am weak. I let them do this to me. I should have fought back. I should have. No, she said firmly but kindly. What happened to you is not your fault. None of it is your fault. You were a child who deserved love and protection, and the adults who should have given you those things failed you. You were a woman who deserved safety and respect, and the man who should have honored you hurt you instead. That is their failure, not yours. You are not weak, Lisa. You are a survivor. Those words washed over me like water in a desert. I had never thought of myself as a survivor. I had only ever thought of myself as a victim. But in that moment, sitting on that couch with this stranger who had shown me more kindness in 20 minutes than I had received in years, something shifted inside me. Maybe I was not as worthless as they had told me. Maybe I was not as broken as I felt. Maybe there was still hope for me after all. Officer May stood up and held out her hand to me. I want to help you, she said. There are resources available, safe places you can go, people who can support you as you heal. But I cannot force you to accept that help. It has to be your choice. She paused and looked me directly in the eyes. Do you want a different life, Lisa? Are you ready to leave this behind and start over? I looked around the apartment that had been my prison. I looked at the broken dishes, the damaged walls, the bloodstains that I had never fully been able to scrub out of the floor. I thought about Wei lying in that hospital bed, about the terror I felt every time I heard his key in the lock, about the certainty that one day his violence would go too far and he would kill me. And then I thought about the little girl who had prayed so desperately for a family. I thought about the child who had dreamed of becoming a teacher. I thought about the teenager who had whispered prayers into the darkness, even when it felt like no one was listening. I thought about all the times I had begged God not to let my story end like this. And I realized that this was my answer. This woman standing before me with her outstretched hand was my answer. This moment, this choice, this opportunity to escape was my answer. God had not forgotten me. God had just been waiting for the right moment. I reached out and took Officer May's hand. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I want a different life. I am ready. She smiled, and it was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. Then let us get you out of here. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Officer May helped me gather a few essential belongings. She made phone calls and filled out paperwork and explained my rights to me in clear, simple terms. She arranged for me to be taken to a women's shelter in another part of the city, a safe place where Wei could not find me, where I could begin to heal. I was terrified. I was leaving everything I knew, as terrible as it was, and stepping into complete uncertainty. I did not know what the shelter would be like. I did not know how I would survive. I did not know if I had the strength to build a new life from nothing. But for the first time in years, I was not alone. Officer May stayed with me through the entire process. She held my hand when I was overwhelmed. She answered my questions patiently. She reassured me over and over again that I was making the right choice, that I was brave, that everything was going to be okay. Before she left me at the shelter, she pressed a card into my hand with her phone number on it. If you ever need anything, she said, if you are scared or confused or just need someone to talk to, you call me. Day or night, I mean it. I clutched that card like a lifeline. Thank you, I whispered, the words completely inadequate for what I was feeling. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for saving my life. She smiled again, that warm, kind smile. You saved yourself, Lisa. You had the courage to say yes when I offered you a way out. Never forget that. Everything that happens from here on out, you earned it. You fought for it. You deserve it. And then she was gone, and I was standing in the lobby of a women's shelter, surrounded by strangers, facing a future that was completely unknown. I wish I could tell you that everything was easy after that. I wish I could tell you that I walked into that shelter and immediately felt safe and happy and whole. But healing does not work that way. Trauma does not work that way. The first few weeks at the shelter were incredibly difficult. I had nightmares every single night. I flinched at sudden movements and loud noises. I found it almost impossible to trust anyone, even the counselors and social workers who were trying to help me. I had spent so many years being hurt by the people who were supposed to care for me that I did not know how to accept genuine kindness. Every time someone was nice to me, I waited for the other shoe to drop. I waited for them to reveal their true intentions, to turn cruel, to hurt me like everyone else had. But the staff at the shelter were patient with me. They understood that trust had to be earned. They gave me space when I needed it and support when I was ready for it. They never pushed me faster than I could go. Slowly, day by day, I began to believe that I was safe. The shelter offered various programs for the women staying there. There was counseling to help us process our trauma. There were educational classes to help those of us who had been denied proper schooling. There were vocational training programs to help us develop skills that would allow us to support ourselves. I threw myself into all of it. I was hungry for knowledge in a way I had not been since I was a child in school. I devoured the educational materials, catching up on years of missed learning. I attended every counseling session, even when it was painful to dig into the past. I asked questions constantly, wanting to understand everything about the resources available to me and how I could take full advantage of them. And then I discovered the tailoring program. It was led by an older woman named Mrs. Liu, who had been a seamstress for 40 years before retiring and volunteering at the shelter. She taught us how to use sewing machines, how to take measurements, how to cut fabric, how to create beautiful garments from simple materials. From the very first class, I fell in love. There was something magical about taking raw fabric and transforming it into something useful and beautiful. There was something deeply satisfying about the precision required, the attention to detail, the way everything had to fit together perfectly. And there was something healing about creating. For so many years, I had only ever destroyed. I had destroyed dishes by accidentally breaking them. I had destroyed my own body through overwork and malnutrition. I had destroyed my self-worth by believing the lies that others told me about myself. But now I was creating. I was taking nothing and making something. I was taking my broken life and stitching it back together, piece by piece, stitch by stitch. Mrs. Liu noticed my dedication and took me under her wing. She spent extra time with me after classes, teaching me advanced techniques, sharing the secrets she had learned over decades in the industry. She told me I had natural talent, that my hands were steady and my eye was precise and my instincts were good. No one had ever told me I had talent before. No one had ever told me I was good at anything. Those words filled a void inside me that I had not even known was there. Months passed. I grew stronger in body and in spirit. The nightmares became less frequent. The flinching became less automatic. The fear that had been my constant companion for so many years began to loosen its grip on my heart. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could build a life worth living. A year after I arrived at the shelter, I got my first job. It was at a small alterations shop owned by a kind older couple. They had heard about the shelter's tailoring program and had agreed to give one of the graduates a chance. When Mrs. Liu recommended me, they agreed to meet with me, and after a short interview and a demonstration of my skills, they offered me a position. I cried when they told me. I cried because I had never had a real job before. I cried because someone was willing to pay me for my work, to value my contributions, to treat me like a professional rather than a servant. I cried because I had dreamed about this moment for so long, and it was finally real. The job was hard work, but it was the kind of hard work I loved. Every day I learned something new. Every day I got a little bit better. Every day I earned money that was mine, truly mine, that no one could take away from me. I rented a small room in a shared apartment. It was tiny and sparsely furnished, but it was mine. I could lock my door at night and know that no one would burst in to scream at me or hurt me. I could cook my own food and eat as much or as little as I wanted. I could make decisions about my own life without asking anyone's permission. Freedom. Real freedom. For the first time in my entire life, I was free. But I did not stop there. The shelter had given me a taste of education, and I wanted more. I enrolled in night classes to complete my schooling. I studied during my lunch breaks and on my days off. I graduated with my diploma at age 22, 15 years later than most people, but no less proud. When they handed me that piece of paper, I thought about the little girl who had loved school so much. I thought about the child who had dreamed of becoming a teacher. I thought about all the years I had believed Mrs. Chen's lie that I was too stupid to learn. I was not too stupid. I had never been too stupid. I had just been surrounded by people who wanted to keep me small. 2 years after I left the shelter, I began speaking at community programs for abandoned girls. It started small. A counselor from the shelter asked if I would be willing to share my story with a group of young women who were going through situations similar to what I had experienced. She thought hearing from someone who had survived might give them hope. I was terrified. I had never spoken in public before. I did not know if I could put my experiences into words, if I could stand in front of strangers and expose my deepest wounds. But I said yes. I said yes, because I remembered what it felt like to be alone and hopeless. I said yes, because I remembered praying for someone to help me. I said yes, because if my story could give even one girl the courage to escape her situation, then every moment of suffering I had endured would have meaning. That first speech was clumsy and halting. I cried multiple times. My hands shook so badly that I could barely hold my notes. But when I finished, something incredible happened. The room erupted in applause. Girls came up to me afterward with tears in their eyes, thanking me for my bravery, telling me that I had given them hope. Counselors and social workers shook my hand and told me what a powerful impact my words had made. I realized in that moment that my pain was not just pain. It was purpose. Every terrible thing I had endured had given me something precious. The ability to connect with girls who felt like no one understood them. The ability to show them that survival was possible. The ability to be living proof that darkness does not have to be the end of the story. I continued speaking at community programs, then at schools, then at conferences. Word spread about the girl with the incredible story, the girl who had survived abuse and neglect and forced marriage and emerged stronger than ever. Organizations began inviting me to share my experience. Newspapers and magazines asked to interview me. I was offered opportunities I had never dreamed possible. And through it all, I kept working at the alterations shop. I kept taking night classes. I kept building my life piece by piece, stitch by stitch, just like I had learned to build beautiful garments from raw fabric. I eventually saved enough money to open my own small tailoring business. It was just a tiny shop in a modest neighborhood, but it was mine. I named it New Beginnings because that is what it represented, the chance to start over, to create something beautiful from nothing. I hired other women from the shelter to work with me. I taught them the skills Mrs. Liu had taught me. I watched them grow in confidence and ability, watched them transform from broken victims into empowered survivors, and I felt a pride deeper than anything I had ever experienced. I was paying forward the kindness that had been shown to me. I was being for others what Officer May and Mrs. Liu and the shelter staff had been for me. I was breaking the cycle of pain and creating a new cycle of hope and healing. Today, as I stand before you telling this story, I am a different person than the terrified girl who once lay on a kitchen floor begging God for help. I am a business owner. I am a public speaker. I am an advocate for abused and abandoned children. I am a survivor. But more than any of those things, I am proof that God hears our prayers. It took years. It took decades. There were countless nights when I thought heaven had gone silent, when I thought my prayers were bouncing off the ceiling and falling back down to earth unheard. But God was listening. God was working. God was preparing people and circumstances and opportunities that would one day come together to save my life and transform my future. The neighbor who looked up at my window that morning was God's instrument. Officer May was God's instrument. The shelter and its staff were God's instrument. Mrs. Liu and her tailoring program were God's instrument. Every single person who showed me kindness along the way was God's instrument. And I am God's instrument too. Every time I speak, every time I share my story, every time I help another broken girl find her way to freedom, I am being used by the same God who rescued me. People often ask me how I survived. They ask how I made it through so many years of suffering without giving up. They ask where my strength came from. And my answer is always the same. I did not survive on my own strength. I survived because I never stopped praying. I survived because even in my darkest moments, even when I could not feel God's presence, even when it seemed like heaven had abandoned me, I kept talking to him. I kept crying out to him. I kept believing that somehow, some way, he would answer. And he did. Not in my timing, not in the way I expected, but in his perfect timing and in his perfect way. They tried to break my life. The parents who abandoned me at birth tried to break my life. The orphanage system that failed to protect me tried to break my life. The Chens who adopted me only to enslave me tried to break my life. Wei who abused me and brutalized me tried to break my life. But they failed. They all failed. Because you cannot break what God has chosen to rebuild. And God rebuilt me. He took all the broken pieces of my shattered existence, and he put them back together in a way that was stronger and more beautiful than the original design. He turned my pain into purpose. He turned my darkness into direction. He turned my suffering into strength. He turned my story into a testimony that has touched thousands of lives and continues to reach more people every single day. If you are listening to this story and you are in a dark place right now, I want you to hear me very clearly. Do not give up. No matter how hopeless things seem, no matter how alone you feel, no matter how convinced you are that no one cares and nothing will ever change, do not give up. Your breakthrough might be one day away. Your rescue might be one prayer away. The person God is sending to help you might be walking toward your door right now. You cannot see the whole picture. You cannot see what God is working on behind the scenes. You cannot see the miraculous transformation that is being prepared for you. But I can promise you, from my own experience, that God is faithful. He does not forget his children. He does not ignore their cries. He does not leave them in darkness forever. Keep praying. Keep hoping. Keep believing. And one day, you will look back on this moment of suffering, and you will understand why you had to go through it. You will see how God used every tear, every wound, every sleepless night to shape you into the person you were meant to become. I know this because I lived it. I am living proof that miracles still happen. I am living proof that God still answers prayers. I am living proof that no matter how broken you are, you can be made whole again. My name is Lisa. I was an abandoned orphan. I was an abused child. I was a battered wife. I was a hopeless victim. But now I am a victorious survivor. And if God can do this for me, he can do it for you too. All you have to do is keep praying. All you have to do is keep believing. All you have to do is keep holding on. Because your miracle is coming. I promise you, your miracle is coming. Just like mine came. Just like mine is still coming, every single day, in ways I never could have imagined. God is not finished with you yet. He is not finished with any of us. We are all works in progress, being shaped and molded and transformed by a creator who loves us more than we can comprehend. So do not give up. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Your story is not over. The best chapters are still being written. And one day, you will stand where I am standing, telling your own testimony of survival and redemption, showing the world what God can do with a life that has been fully surrendered to his purpose. I believe in you. I am praying for you. And I cannot wait to hear your story. If you believe in miracles, if this story has touched your heart, if you know that God is able to rebuild what has been broken, type Amen in the comments below. And if you are struggling right now, if you are in a dark place and you need someone to pray for you, type prayer and know that you are not alone. We are in this together. And together, with God's help, we will overcome.